I never imagined I'd be here, 32, successful, and living the life I had once only dreamed of. My name is Lauren, and I'm an artist. Not the starving kind either. I've built a career out of my work, a rare feat in a world where creative professions are often dismissed as hobbies. I make a six-figure income, something I take immense pride in, not because of the money itself, but because it proves that my passion is valuable. My paintings sell for thousands. I have gallery showings booked months in advance, and my name is recognized in the art world. Art isn't just what I do, it's who I am. Then there's Jake, my fiancé. He's 35, works in corporate finance, and is about as different from me as a person could be. Where I thrive on creativity and unpredictability, he thrives on structure and logic. We've been together for 5 years, engaged for the last 8 months. People say we balance each other out, me, the dreamer, him, the realist. Sometimes I believe that. Other times, I wonder if we're just two people forcing a puzzle piece to fit where it doesn't belong. We live in a sleek, modern condo in downtown Chicago. It's Jake's place, technically. He bought it before we got engaged, and I moved in a year ago. It's pristine, with minimalist decor and neutral tones, beige, white, gray. My paintings add the only bursts of color. It's beautiful, but it's not really me. My old apartment, the one I gave up, was cluttered with canvases, half-finished sketches, and random trinkets I picked up from flea markets. Here, everything has its place, its purpose. Jake and I met through mutual friends at a party. I remember being drawn to him immediately, not in a passionate, whirlwind romance kind of way, but in a slow, steady pull. He was confident, composed, and had this way of looking at me like he understood something about me that I didn't even understand myself. It was refreshing. He wasn't like the struggling artists or moody musicians I had dated before. He was stable. He had a plan. He knew where his life was going, and for the first time I thought maybe I should know that too. In the beginning, things were easy. He admired my work, or at least, he admired the success it brought me. He took me to expensive restaurants, introduced me to his colleagues, and told me how different I was from the women he usually met. I liked being different. I liked being chosen. But over time, subtle things started to change. He never said it outright, but I could tell he didn't fully respect what I did. He saw my work as a fortunate fluke, not something built on years of struggle and rejection. He would say things like, "It's amazing that people actually pay for this," while gesturing to one of my paintings. Or, "You're so lucky your passion turned into a career," as if luck had more to do with it than the thousands of hours I had put in. I ignored it. I told myself he didn't mean it that way. Our engagement was expected. Not a grand romantic gesture, not a surprise. We had talked about marriage, about timelines. Jake is a planner after all. He proposed over dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, sliding a velvet box across the table instead of getting down on one knee. The ring was stunning, platinum, a 2-carat diamond, classic and expensive. "It's timeless," he had said, and I knew he meant that as a compliment. But I remember looking at it and feeling nothing. No rush of joy, no butterflies. Just an odd sense of finality, like a door clicking shut. Still, I said yes, because that's what I was supposed to do. I told myself my doubts were just cold feet, that every couple has them. But as the months passed, the feeling only grew. And now here I am, sitting in my studio, well, the spare bedroom that Jake graciously allows me to use, staring at a blank canvas, feeling more lost than I ever have before. I used to think Jake admired my creativity. In the early years of our relationship, he would watch me paint with genuine fascination, asking about my process, the meaning behind my work. He came to my gallery showings, proud to be by my side. I remember him introducing me to his colleagues, saying, "Lauren's an artist, an incredible one," and there was real admiration in his voice. But now, 5 years later and 8 months into our engagement, something has shifted. It started during the wedding planning. I had found the perfect venue, an artistic estate just outside the city, surrounded by sprawling gardens and grand, historic architecture. The moment I stepped onto the property, I could see it. The ceremony framed by the towering oak trees, our guests walking through stone archways adorned with cascading flowers. It was breathtaking, the kind of place that made my artist's heart swell. It was expensive, yes, but I could afford it. I offered to cover most of the costs myself, something I thought would make things easier. But Jake wasn't impressed. "Why would we waste that kind of money on a venue?" he scoffed. "It's just one day. It's our wedding day," I reminded him, but he only shrugged. "It's unnecessary. We could have the ceremony at a nice hotel, something practical." That word. Practical. That's how he saw things now. My dream venue wasn't practical. My excitement wasn't practical. My career, apparently, wasn't practical either. It was subtle at first. Little comments here and there. A dismissive tone when I talked about a new commission or an upcoming gallery showing. But then it escalated. At a dinner with his friends, someone asked about my latest project. Before I could answer, Jake cut in. "Oh, just another one of her little painting things." He chuckled, as if it were amusing, as if my work was a quaint pastime, not the thing that paid for half of our life. I laughed it off, but my face burned. I told myself he wasn't trying to be cruel. Maybe he was just trying to be funny. Then came dinner with his family. His parents, Richard and Helen, were exactly what you'd expect from a wealthy, conservative family. Polished, proper, and obsessed with appearances. His mother had always been pleasant, but distant, as if she never quite knew what to make of me. Halfway through dinner, between bites of filet mignon, Jake made a joke. If this whole art thing doesn't work out, at least Lauren can sell paintings on the street. Maybe set up a little booth in the park. His father chuckled. His brother smirked. And his mother Helen smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, it's cute that you're doing what you love, dear." Cute. Like I was a child showing off a finger painting. I stared at Jake, waiting for him to correct her, to tell his family that I wasn't some hobbyist dabbling in paint. I was a professional, a successful one. But he didn't. He just kept eating, as if nothing had happened. The car ride home from Jake's parents' house was silent. My hands were clenched in my lap, my jaw tight. I replayed the dinner over and over in my mind. Jake's joke, his mother's condescending smile, the way no one had defended me. The way Jake had let it happen. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. What the hell was that? I snapped, turning to face him as he drove. He barely glanced at me. What? That joke, Jake? The one about me selling paintings in a park? And your mom, calling my career cute like I'm a child playing dress-up? You just sat there and laughed. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head like I was overreacting. Lauren, it was just a joke. You're being too sensitive. I felt something inside me snap. Too sensitive? My voice was rising, but I didn't care. Jake, I run a successful business. I make more money than half the people in that damn room, including your brother, and yet I'm the one being treated like some aimless hobbyist? And you... I pointed at him, my hand shaking. You're the worst of them all. You didn't even defend me. For God's sake, Lauren, he groaned. Why do you always have to make everything about you? I stared at him in disbelief. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. A week later, we sat down to finalize our wedding budget. Or at least, I tried to. Jake had been distant ever since the dinner, and I was trying to push past it, to focus on moving forward. So if we go with the estate, I said, flipping through my notes, I can cover most of the cost, and that leaves us with plenty for the... Jake cut me off. Actually, I've been thinking, he said, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. If we need to save money, maybe we should cut back on unnecessary expenses. I frowned. Like what? He gave me a pointed look. Like your hobbies. It took me a second to process what he had just said. My hobbies. I repeated slowly, my voice dangerously calm. He shrugged. You spend thousands on paint, canvases, whatever. If we're saving for the wedding, maybe it's time to be a little more responsible. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Are you serious? My hobbies are what pay for half of this wedding, Jake. Hell, half of this apartment. You think I'm just throwing money away? I think you're spending a lot on something that isn't exactly stable, he said coolly. I'm just saying, a real career wouldn't require you to gamble on people buying your work. A real career. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing myself to stay calm. But when I opened them, all I felt was clarity. I set my pen down. I can't do this. Jake frowned. Do what? This. I gestured between us. The wedding. I'm putting it on hold. His expression shifted instantly. What the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I'm about to marry someone who doesn't respect what I do. Who doesn't respect me? I stood up. I need time to think. Jake shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. You're humiliating me, he snapped. After everything I've done for you, you're going to make me look like a fool in front of my family? I flinched at the sharpness in his tone, but I held my ground. I think you did that all on your own. I don't know why I agreed to therapy. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe we could fix this, that Jake wasn't really the person he was starting to reveal himself to be. Or maybe I just needed confirmation, undeniable proof that the man I had spent 5 years with was no longer someone I recognized. The therapist's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and deep cushioned chairs that were meant to make you feel comfortable. But nothing could make me comfortable when I heard the words that came out of Jake's mouth. I just want a traditional wife, he said, as if that was the most reasonable thing in the world. I blinked. A what? He exhaled, like he was already exhausted by me. You know. Someone practical. Someone who takes care of the home, focuses on family. Someone stable. I turned to the therapist, Dr. Fields, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. Do you hear this? I asked her stunned. Dr. Fields nodded, jotting something down in her notebook. Jake, can you clarify what you mean by traditional? Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm just saying that I work hard to provide, and I think it's fair to expect my wife to prioritize the home. Not be so, caught up in a career that isn't exactly reliable. I laughed. But it came out sharp, bitter. Not reliable? I make more money than you some months. Jake's jaw tightened. That's not the point. What is the point? That you're obsessed with this art thing, he snapped. It's like you care more about your paintings than about our future. I turned to Dr. Fields again. Are you getting this? She sighed. Jake, have you expressed these expectations to Lauren before the engagement? He hesitated, then shrugged. I assumed it was understood. Oh, that was rich. You assumed. I said, my voice rising. You assumed that after 5 years of building my career, after paying for half of everything we have, after covering most of this damn wedding, that I was just going to drop everything and become some 1950s housewife? Jake didn't answer. I stared at him, really stared, and for the first time, I saw it. The version of me he wanted. A wife who wouldn't challenge him, who would prioritize his needs, who would shrink herself down to fit into his carefully structured life. And I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there silent, as the pieces fell into place. 2 days later, we had dinner with his family again. I should have known better. You have to understand, dear, his mother Helen said, dabbing at the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. Marriage is about compromise. Jake's father, Richard, nodded. You have to think practically. Art is wonderful, of course, but a family needs stability. Jake's older brother, Matthew, smirked over his glass of whiskey. Honestly, Lauren, I don't know how Jake puts up with it. He's been complaining about your job for years. I froze. Excuse me, Matthew chuckled. What? You didn't know. He gestured toward Jake. He's been saying for ages that your little art career gets in the way of your relationship. How you never have time for him. How he's the only one thinking about the future. I turned to Jake, my heart pounding. Is that true? Jake looked irritated, like I was being ridiculous again. I was venting, he muttered. Don't make this a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a massive deal. And then Helen delivered the final blow. Well, she said, smiling pleasantly, once you two are married, I'm sure things will fall into place. You'll want to focus on the family more. And of course, the extra space in the apartment will make a perfect nursery. I felt like I had been punched. I swallowed hard. What extra space? Helen tilted her head. The studio, dear. Jake said it would be the nursery. The blood drained from my face. I turned to Jake, waiting for him to deny it. But he didn't. He just stared at his plate like he wished this conversation would end. That was it. That was the moment I knew. There was no fixing this. I didn't say anything that night at dinner. I just sat there, numb, while Jake and his family continued their conversation as if my entire life hadn't just been rewritten without my consent. When we got home, I packed a bag. Jake walked into the bedroom just as I was zipping it up. What are you doing? He asked, his voice tight. I turned to face him, my hands trembling. I'm leaving. His expression darkened. Lauren, don't be dramatic. Dramatic. I let out a bitter laugh. You planned out my entire future without even asking me. You told your family my studio would be a nursery before even mentioning kids to me. You've been telling your friends that my career is a problem. Do you even hear yourself? Jake's face twisted in anger. Oh, give me a break. You're making this all about you. I snapped. IT is about me, Jake. It's my life. My work. My future. And you've spent the past year treating it like an inconvenience. He threw his hands up. You're so damn selfish, Lauren. You don't care about marriage. You don't care about compromise. You just want to run around painting like some teenager with a dream. I was trying to give you a real life. I stared at him, my chest rising and falling rapidly. A real life. I whispered. Jake, I have a life. A good one. One that I built without you. And I'm done pretending that you respect that. His face turned red with fury. Fine. Go ahead. Run away. But don't come crawling back when you realize you just threw away a future with someone who actually wanted to take care of you. I grabbed my bag and walked out. I stayed at a hotel for a night before driving to my parents' house. When I arrived, my mom took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Oh, sweetheart, she murmured, holding me tight. My dad, usually the reserved type, clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, you made the right choice. Jake's family, however, saw it differently. His mother called me 2 days later, her voice dripping with disapproval. Lauren, dear, I hope you've taken some time to reconsider. I haven't, I said flatly. She sighed. You're throwing away a good man. Marriage is about sacrifice, you know. You can't always get your way. I gritted my teeth. And neither can Jake. She huffed. You'll regret this. I didn't. A week later, I posted about everything on Reddit, needing an outlet. I never expected the response I got. The post blew up, thousands of comments from people supporting me, telling me I had dodged a massive bullet. Women shared their own horror stories about partners who had dismissed their careers, about in-laws who expected them to sacrifice everything. I read every comment, and for the first time in months, I felt truly seen. Starting over was terrifying. But staying in the same place, shrinking myself to fit into Jake's life, would have been worse. 3 months after the breakup, I packed up everything and moved to Portland. It wasn't a random choice. The city had an incredible art scene, thriving galleries, and a creative energy I hadn't felt in years. I found a loft downtown, a messy sunlit space that smelled like old wood and fresh paint, and for the first time in forever, I felt at home. And then, things started happening. It started with a local gallery reaching out to showcase my work. From there, word spread. Within months, I was invited to exhibit at a prestigious West Coast art fair, where a renowned curator named Victor Langley, an eccentric, brilliant man with wild silver hair, took an interest in me. You have something, Victor told me after studying one of my larger abstract pieces. Emotion. Chaos. Most artists take years to find that, but you've lived it. He became a mentor, pushing me in ways I never expected. Bigger, bolder, he'd say, waving his hands dramatically as I worked. Don't hold back. I didn't. And because of that, I got an invitation to a large-scale international exhibition in Paris. Paris. The announcement went viral in the art world. Critics started calling me the next big thing. Galleries from New York to Tokyo reached out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just a successful artist. I was a recognized name. Then, out of nowhere, Jake resurfaced. It started subtly. A text I ignored. An email I deleted. Then, a public post on LinkedIn, of all places, where he wrote some passive-aggressive nonsense about how some people prioritize ambition over family. I knew exactly who he meant. I never responded. Never reached out. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. Reddit had been my unexpected support system through all of it. Strangers who had followed my story since that first viral post continued to cheer me on. When I announced the Paris exhibition, the comments exploded. And he wanted her to give this up to be his personal maid? Lauren, if I see Jake crying in your DMs, I'll riot. You are living your best life. Never let a mediocre man dull your shine again. They were right. I had made the right choice. And I would never doubt it again. The past has a strange way of creeping up on you when you least expect it. It had been over a year since I left Jake, and life had never been better. My career was thriving, I had found real happiness in my work, and for the first time I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Then, one afternoon my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw the caller ID. Helen Carter. Jake's mother. Curiosity got the best of me. Lauren, she said after a long pause. I owe you an apology. I almost dropped the phone. She sighed heavily. We treated you unfairly. I treated you unfairly. And I see now that I was wrong. I stayed silent, waiting. Jake was raised to believe certain things about marriage, she continued. We put those ideas in his head. But it wasn't fair to you. And, well, I just wanted to say that I regret how he acted. I didn't know what to say. This was the same woman who had called my career cute and dismissed my entire life's work. Now, she was apologizing? Thank you, I finally said, though I wasn't sure what else to add. After the call, I sat in my studio, staring at a blank canvas. There was still something unfinished inside me, something I hadn't fully let go of. So I wrote a letter to Jake. I didn't send it, it wasn't for him. It was for me. I wrote about the hurt, the betrayal, the dismissal of my dreams. But I also wrote about growth, about finding myself again, about the life I built without him. And when I finished, I folded the letter, set it on fire, and watched the ashes drift away. That was the real goodbye. From that moment, I poured myself into something bigger. I started teaching workshops for young artists, giving them the guidance I had wished for when I was starting out. Then, with the help of Victor Langley and other industry leaders, I launched the Canvas Initiative, a program dedicated to supporting women in the arts, providing grants, mentorship, and exhibition opportunities. It was at one of these major art events, an elite gala in New York, that I saw him. Jake. He looked older. Not in the sense of age, but in the way a person carries regret. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he walked over. Lauren, he said, his voice softer than I remembered. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. He looked like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing left to say. We weren't those people anymore. And as he walked away, I felt no anger, no sadness. Just peace. That weekend, I threw a party. Not just any party, a freedom party. A celebration of everything I had overcome. My friends, fellow artists, and even some of my biggest supporters from Reddit flew in for it. We drank, we danced, we laughed until our stomachs hurt. And at the end of the night, standing on the balcony overlooking the city, I made a decision. I logged onto Reddit one last time. Thank you all for being part of my journey. You helped me when I needed it most. But now it's time to move forward. This is my last post. I have a life to live, and I don't want to spend it looking back. To anyone who needs to hear this, choose yourself. It's always worth it. I closed the app. And then I stepped into the future I had built, on my own terms.